What if everything you believed about love was put to the test by a bet? Mario has always been sure of one thing: feelings are an illusion. For him, relationships are nothing more than unsigned contracts. But when his best friend challenges him to get married in 6 months, he decides to prove his point in the coldest way possible, by turning a marriage into a simple business deal. His chosen one? Katie, his new maid, a strong woman who has never been fooled by empty promises. The plan seemed perfect. No love, no complications, just a contract. But what happens when a game of convenience starts to become real, and worse? What happens when the truth comes out and the bet turns into the biggest loss of your life? Get ready for a story where pride, feelings, and secrets collide. Can love be born where there should only be agreement? The answer will surprise you. The restaurant was packed. The city's elite gathered there to close deals, flaunt their achievements, and of course feed their egos. At a reserved table in the corner, Mario held a glass of wine, listening without much interest to Carlos's provocations. You may have millions in your account, but you've never understood anything about love. Mario rolled his eyes, bringing the glass to his lips. Because love doesn't exist. It's just an unsigned contract. Carlos laughed, leaning back in his chair as if he were about to checkmate him. That's funny. I've always known that you don't believe in love, but I never imagined that you'd be so afraid of it. Afraid? Mario arched an eyebrow dismissively. Yes, you run away from marriage as if it were a bad investment, because it usually is. Then prove it. Mario crossed his arms. How? Carlos smiled, the kind of smile that meant trouble. Get married in 6 months. Choose whoever you want. Pretend all you want, just prove that feelings have nothing to do with it. Mario let out a short laugh. How childish. Oh, I see. You're afraid. Mario's pride ignited like gasoline near a fire. He placed the wine glass on the table with a soft clang. Closed. Carlos blinked, surprised at the speed of the answer. That was easy. Because I know I'm right. Mario leaned forward. In 6 months, I'm going to get married. And when I come out of this intact, without an emotional scratch, you'll never fill me up with this bullshit about love again. Carlos smiled, satisfied. Let's see. That same evening, Mario began to think about his strategy. He didn't want to waste time on a real relationship. That's what stupid people did. He just needed someone who was up for the farce, someone with no romantic illusions. The next morning, a young woman arrived at his mansion carrying a battered backpack. Mario didn't know her name yet, but something about her caught his attention. She didn't seem impressed by the high gates or the imported cars in the garage. She just looked around calmly, assessing the place as if it were any other. When she introduced herself as the new employee, Mario smiled to himself. You look like the type who doesn't fool easily, he commented, watching her closely. She stopped looking around and crossed her arms. Is that a compliment or a test? Mario smiled, intrigued. A fact. He didn't have to think long. If anyone could prove that feelings were an illusion, it was her. Later that evening, Mario called her for a formal chat. I want to make you an offer, he said, straight to the point. She arched an eyebrow. If it's something indecent, I'll let you know that I'm not that kind of employee. Mario laughed quietly. Not at all. It's a business deal. A contract, if you like. She crossed her arms. I'm listening. I need a wife for 6 months. Just on paper. You carry on with your life as normal, and I solve a personal problem. In the end, you get a generous sum. She blinked, processing. Is this a prank? Is there a hidden camera? No, it's a deal. She was silent for a few seconds. Then she laughed, shaking her head. Do you really think I'd accept such nonsense? Why not? Because I'm not crazy. She pointed at him. And because I know that this kind of proposal always has a trick, Mario tilted his head. You need money, don't you? She turned serious. It's none of your business. But it is a fact, he shrugged. This proposal could solve your problems. She narrowed her eyes. You think it's all about money, don't you? Generally, yes, she snorted. I'm not a commodity. I know that. That's why I'm giving you a choice. She stood up, indignant. I have dignity. So do I, he said calmly. And that's why I'm not asking for anything other than a contract. She hesitated, staring at him. That doesn't make any sense. It does to me. She turned on her heels and left the room. But that night, as she lay down to sleep, his words echoed in her mind. You need money. Unfortunately, he was right, and the next day she returned to his office. Let's talk, she said, looking serious. Mario smiled, just as he had predicted. Katie sat down on the sofa in Mario's living room, keeping her arms crossed and her expression serious. I'll listen, but that doesn't mean I'll accept. Mario smiled. He had expected resistance. Fair enough. Here's my proposal. A sham marriage. You continue your life as usual, but on paper, we'll be husband and wife. You'll be well rewarded for it. Katie narrowed her eyes. It sounds too good to be true. There are no catches, just a contract. I need a wife for a while, and you need money. She tilted her head, watching him. You talk about marriage as if you were buying a car, because deep down, it's a business, he replied. Katie laughed humorlessly. You're unbelievable. I'm practical, Mario corrected. She sighed thoughtfully. The money he was offering could completely change her life and help her sick mother. But if it involved marriage, even a fake one, something inside her hesitated. I need guarantees, she said at last. Speak up. I want a written contract. No physical involvement, no obligations beyond what is necessary to keep up the charade, and most importantly, no surprises. Mario agreed without hesitation. Done. He held out his hand to seal the deal. Katie looked at his open palm and for a moment thought about backing away, but in the end she shook his hand. If you break any of my conditions, it's over, he warned. You'll see that I'm a man of my word, Mario assured her. 2 days later, Katie returned to Mario's house to sign the contract. A lawyer was there, formalizing everything. As she picked up the pen, she hesitated for a second before signing her name. She was now officially married to a stranger. That evening, she packed her bags and moved into his house. The atmosphere was so sophisticated and cold that she immediately felt out of place. Mario appeared at the bedroom door. Welcome to your new home. Katie looked around and let out a sigh. It's going to take some getting used to. You'll get used to it. She looked at him skeptically. You talk as if it's easy, he shrugged. Just keep your mind on the goal. Remember that it's a contract. Katie bit her lower lip, uncomfortable. I just hope I don't regret it. Mario smiled. Regrets only exist when there are feelings involved, and we both know that's not the case. The next day, the first big test took place. They had an important event to attend as a couple. Katie spent hours trying to choose something suitable to wear. When she finally went downstairs, she found Mario waiting in an impeccable suit. He looked her over from head to toe. Not bad, she snorted. Is that the closest thing to a compliment I'm going to get? Probably. Katie crossed her arms. That's right. And I thought you could be charming whenever you wanted. That's not my role in this deal. At the event, Katie felt all eyes on her. Some people whispered, surprised by Mario's new wife, but he remained impassive. Smile and pretend you like me, he murmured. Katie smiled falsely, rolling her eyes. This is turning out to be harder than I thought. Mario held her hand and, to the audience, looked like the perfect husband. Welcome to the game. During the evening, some socialites approached. clearly suspicious. "What a surprise, Mario," said one of them. "We didn't know you'd found someone special." Mario slipped his arm around Katie's waist and smiled. "When it happens, it happens." Katie smiled too, but couldn't help her sharp reply. "Some things happen when you least expect them." The woman analyzed Katie from head to toe. "What about you? What did you do before you met Mario?" Katie felt her blood boil. The question was clearly a provocation. She smiled wryly. "I was working. Something you may not know what that means." The socialite's eyes widened, and Mario held back a smile. "She has an incredible sense of humor, don't you think?" he said, ending the conversation and taking Katie to another corner. As they left the event, Katie let out a sigh of relief. "I hate those kind of people." Mario smiled. "You handled them well." She looked at him suspiciously. "Was that a compliment?" "Maybe," Katie snorted. "What a miracle. You'll have to get used to it." Katie rolled her eyes, but deep down she realized that the night had been a little less horrible than she had expected. However, it was only the beginning. Katie woke up to the sound of footsteps downstairs. She was still getting used to the large, silent house. It took her a second to remember where she was and why. She closed her eyes and let out a long sigh. Married. Not really, of course, but on paper, yes. After getting ready, she went down to the kitchen and found Mario reading a newspaper, drinking coffee. He looked at her over his cup. "Good morning." "Really?" Katie grumbled, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Are you in a bad mood?" "Sleeping in a strange place does that to me." Mario calmly folded the newspaper. "You'll get used to it." Katie snorted. "I doubt it." He shrugged and went back to his coffee. The next few days were marked by a strange routine. On paper they were husband and wife, but inside that house they were two strangers sharing space. At the weekend, Mario announced, "We have another event tomorrow." Katie groaned. "Again?" "It's part of the deal." She rolled her eyes, but she had no choice. The next day, as she got ready, she tried to convince herself that this was just a job. Nothing more. When she came downstairs, Mario was waiting, as impeccable as ever. He looked her up and down. "This inspection again? Just making sure you're in good shape." "Am I?" Mario smiled. "You'll pass. It's funny, you seem less unbearable when you're quiet. And when you're not rolling your eyes every 5 minutes." Katie took a deep breath. It was going to be a long night. At the event, Mario greeted people while holding their hands. Katie remained attentive, trying to look natural. Then a woman approached, giving her an appraising look. "Are you Mario's new wife?" "I guess so." The woman narrowed her eyes. "And how did you two meet?" Katie opened her mouth to answer, but Mario was quicker. "It was unexpected. One day she was in my life. The next I realized I didn't want her to leave." Mario's casual and convincing tone surprised even Katie. "Wow," the woman said suspiciously. "It sounds like something out of a movie." Katie smiled. "Life is like that." The woman walked away, still unconvinced. Mario leaned slightly towards Katie. "You're learning." "I'm just having fun with it." He smiled but said nothing. Later in the car, Katie breathed a sigh of relief. "That was exhausting. You did well." "Thank you." "I think so." "It was a compliment, yes." She laughed. That night, while she was in her room, Katie thought about how her life had changed so quickly. She knew she couldn't let her guard down, but something in her began to wonder if Mario wasn't starting to lose himself in this game too. Katie was gradually getting used to her new routine, but living with Mario was still a constant game of provocation. He was methodical, organized to the extreme. She, on the other hand, not so much. That morning, when he entered the kitchen, Mario found the sink full of dishes and the worktop in a mess. What happened here? Did a hurricane come through? Katie, sitting at the table, nibbled on a piece of toast. "Oh, I made coffee." Mario crossed his arms. A coffee or an experiment in mass destruction? Exaggerated. He took a deep breath and picked up a cloth to wipe down the counter. There are rules here. Katie smiled. Welcome to real life. Mario glanced at her but said nothing. The forced coexistence brought unexpected moments. Sometimes, while they were having coffee, Katie would catch him distracted, watching her in a way that didn't suit him. One evening, he came home from work to find her in the kitchen, humming softly as she cooked. "Since when do you make food here?" Katie shrugged. "Since I realized that the chefs in this house make beautiful dishes, but they don't fill me up." He looked at the pot on the stove. "What's that?" "Real food." Mario arched an eyebrow. "Are you implying that I don't know what that is?" She laughed. "I'm saying it." He leaned back against the counter. "I want to see if it's any good." Katie snorted. "You have a boring palate." "And you're afraid of my opinion?" She picked up a spoon and shoved it into his mouth without warning. Mario blinked, surprised. "So?" He chewed slowly. "It's not bad." Katie smiled, victorious. "I knew it." For the first time since this crazy arrangement began, they laughed together. A few days later, they were at a dinner party with Mario's friends. Between conversations and glasses of wine, Katie stepped away to get some air. When she returned, she overheard a conversation that made her stop midway. "I don't think this marriage will last," one of Mario's friends said. "I agree. He never took anyone seriously. Why should it be any different now?" Before Katie could react, Mario intervened. "I don't remember asking your opinion." His calm but sharp tone silenced the table. Katie felt something strange in her chest. Later, when they were leaving, she broke the silence in the car. "Thank you for defending me." Mario kept his eyes on the road. "It was nothing." "Yes, it was." He shrugged. "I just don't like people talking about my wife." That word, wife, echoed in her mind in a strange way. She looked away to the window. Something was changing. Katie was concentrating on organizing some things in the living room when she felt Mario approach. She knew he was there before she even turned around. His presence had been impossible to ignore lately. "I need you to accompany me to an important event tomorrow," he said, crossing his arms. She rolled her eyes. "Another event? I thought this sort of thing only happened once in a while." "It's part of the deal." "I know," she sighed. "But I'm beginning to think you're just trying to torture me." Mario smiled. "Maybe a little." The following evening, Katie was getting ready when Mario appeared in her bedroom doorway. He watched her for a moment before saying, "You look different." She raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment or a criticism?" "It's a fact." She laughed. "Do you have a problem with simply saying that I'm beautiful?" He took a step forward, narrowing his eyes. "You look beautiful." The way he said it made Katie feel a strange chill in her stomach. At the event, everything seemed to be going smoothly, until, in the middle of a conversation, someone made a comment that knocked Katie off her feet. "So, Katie, what's it like being married to one of the most sought-after men in town?" She felt everyone's eyes on her. Mario took her hand lightly, as if to calm her down. "Oh, it's a constant challenge," said Katie with a smile. "But I like challenges." The answer drew laughter, and the conversation moved on. But something remained in the air. Later in the car, Mario broke the silence. "You lied well." Katie smiled, but there was something in her eyes. "I think I'm getting the hang of it." The atmosphere between them was different. Over the next few days, Katie realized that she was starting to notice Mario too much. The little gestures, the moments when he seemed more relaxed. One evening, they were on the balcony chatting about trivia when a cold wind blew. Katie shivered slightly, and before she could react, Mario took off his jacket and slung it over his shoulders. She looked at him in surprise. "You're being kind." "That's rare." "I'm not used to you complaining about the cold." Katie laughed. "You never get used to anything, do you?" He looked away, thoughtful. Maybe I'm starting to. That night, Katie lay in bed feeling something different, as if she was somewhere she shouldn't be. But before she could lose herself in her own thoughts, she heard a knock on the door. "May I come in?" It was Mario. She frowned. "What's wrong?" He hesitated for a second before saying, "Nothing, just good night." She felt her heart racing but kept her expression neutral. "Good night, Mario." And he left. But something had changed. Katie felt that something was different, but she refused to admit it. Since her last conversation with Mario, a silence full of meaning had hung between them. She tried to convince herself that it was all in her head. After all, this marriage was a contract, nothing more. That morning she was in the kitchen, absent-mindedly fiddling with her cell phone, when she heard the front door slam. "Did Mario leave early today?" asked one of the employees. "Yes, ma'am." He seemed rushed. Katie just nodded and went back to her coffee, trying to ignore the strange discomfort in her chest. Since when did she care about his schedule? She tried to occupy herself with other things, but she couldn't concentrate on anything. The next thing she knew, she was standing in the doorway, waiting for him to come back. The doorbell rang. Katie opened the door, expecting to see Mario, but it was Carlos. "Look at you, the model wife," he joked, entering without ceremony. She forced a smile and closed the door. "What brings you here?" "I came to see how my friend is doing in the most unlikely wedding of the year." "We're surviving," Carlos laughed. "Oh, I have no doubts. But tell me something, do you already know about the bet?" Katie blinked, confused. "Bet?" Carlos frowned. "Didn't Mario tell you?" "Told you what?" Before he could answer, the front door opened and Mario walked in. He stopped when he saw the two of them in the living room. "What's going on here?" "I was just updating your wife on our bet." Mario shot a deadly glance at Carlos, but Katie was already on alert. "What bet?" she asked, crossing her arms. Carlos smiled as if he had just dropped a bomb and was anxious to see the explosion. "Ah, so she really doesn't know." "Carlos, that's enough." "No, Mario, now I want to know," Katie insisted, looking directly at him. Mario sighed, wiping his hand across his face. "It's nothing. It's just bullshit." "A bet is never bullshit," she retorted, clenching her fists. "Tell me the truth." Carlos laughed, amused. "Well, your husband here accepted a challenge. He had to get married in 6 months to prove that love is an illusion." Katie felt the blood drain from her face. She blinked a few times, trying to absorb the information. "So," her voice came out low, "all this time I was just part of a game." Mario hesitated. "At first, yes, but in the beginning?" She laughed humorlessly. "And when exactly were you going to tell me this?" "I was going to tell you." He tried to move closer, but she backed away. "Oh, of course. The day the contract expired, right? You were going to thank me for my work and send me away." Carlos realized he had created a real problem and decided to sneak out. "Well, I think I've played my part here. I'll see you later." The door slammed behind him. Mario tried to speak, but Katie held up her hand to stop him. "I don't want to hear." "Katie, please listen to me." "Listen to what? You lied to me the whole time." "It wasn't a lie." "Oh, no!" She let out a bitter laugh. "Then what was it? A strategic omission?" He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I didn't want you to find out like that." "And how did you want it?" "With a thank you letter." She ran her hands over her face, feeling the anger rising. "It was never real for you, was it?" "Katie, It doesn't matter," she interrupted him. "I've already made my decision." She walked up the stairs without looking back. Mario stood there, watching her disappear down the corridor, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a real fear of losing something he didn't even know he wanted. That night, Katie packed her bags, and the next morning when Mario woke up, she was gone. Mario entered the silent house and felt a strange weight in his chest. It was a feeling he didn't know well. Emptiness. He looked around as if he expected to see Katie come out of some corner and complain about something, but he knew that wouldn't happen. She was gone. He climbed the stairs slowly, as if he were pushing an invisible weight. When he opened the door to her room, he found it almost empty. Only one small detail remained behind, a mug with a broken handle on the bedside table. He picked it up, feeling his fingers grow cold. The phone rang, snapping him out of his thoughts. "Are you alive?" Carlos' voice sounded on the other end of the line. "What do you think? I think you've ruined everything." Mario closed his eyes, trying to contain his frustration. "Don't start, Carlos. Do you want me to pretend that you didn't ruin everything? Because believe me, you did." Mario didn't answer. He knew Carlos was right. After hanging up, he went to the office. Work had always been the solution to distract his mind, but now even that didn't seem enough. The days dragged by. He avoided talking about Katie, avoided thinking about her, but every corner of the house reminded him of her. One evening he walked into the kitchen and found an employee cleaning up. "Sir, you should eat something." "I'm not hungry." She hesitated. You know." Before she left, Katie asked me to leave this in the fridge. Mario frowned. "What?" The woman opened the fridge and took out a small glass container. "She said it was for you." He took the jar, confused. When he opened it, the smell hit him immediately. It was the dish she had made that night when they had joked about her picky eating. He felt a lump in his throat that he hadn't expected. He left the pot on the counter and walked out of the kitchen without saying a word. That night, he didn't sleep. The next morning he made a decision. He left the house, got in his car, and drove without thinking much. A few minutes later, he was stopped in front of Katie's house. He took a deep breath before knocking on the door. The door opened and Katie was surprised to see him there. "What are you doing here?" Mario held the broken handle of the mug he had brought with him. "You forgot this." She crossed her arms. "Why did you bring it here?" He hesitated for a second. "Because I need to talk to you." She was silent for a moment before taking a step to the side. "Then come in." He entered, feeling his heart beat fast. After all, this was his last chance. Mario entered Katie's house and realized that everything there was completely different from the environment in which he lived. The place had color, warmth, life. Nothing there seemed as cold or calculated as his mansion. Katie closed the door and crossed her arms. "Speak up." He held the mug with the broken handle, turning it between his fingers. "You forgot that." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "You came all this way for an old mug?" Mario took a deep breath, straightening his posture. "No, I didn't." She waited, impatient. "Well?" He looked up and stared at her. "I've ruined everything." Katie raised her eyebrows. "You figured that out on your own." He closed his eyes for a moment before continuing. "At first, yes, it was a bet, but something changed. You changed everything." She crossed her arms, defensive. "Did you expect me to believe you after you lied to me all this time?" Mario took a step forward. "I didn't expect to fall in love with you, Katie, but it happened." Silence filled the room. She blinked, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. "What happened?" "I love you, and that's not part of any bet." Katie looked away, clearly shaken. "You lied to me. I believed that, somehow, this thing between us was real." Mario ran his hands through his hair, frustrated with himself. "I know that, and I was an idiot. I thought I knew everything about control and logic, but you made me realize that I was wrong." Katie remained motionless, staring at him as if trying to decide whether to believe him or not. "You made me want something that no money can buy," he continued, his voice lower now. "I only realized it too late." She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. "Mario, I don't know if I can trust you again." He took another step forward, reducing the distance between them. "I don't blame you for that, but I'm willing to spend as much time as it takes proving that this here he pointed at the two of them, is real. Katie held his gaze for a moment. Would you do that? Yes, he said without hesitation. She looked down at the floor, twiddling her thumbs nervously. Why? Mario smiled slightly. Because I've never fought for anything in my life. I've always had everything at my fingertips. But you're not something I can buy. You're the first thing that really matters to me. Katie opened her mouth, but then closed it. I need time, she said at last. That's fine, he nodded. I'll give you as much time as you need. She took a deep breath before asking, You're not going to give up? He smiled. Never. For a long moment they just looked at each other. Then, without saying another word, Katie stepped forward and leaned her forehead against his. Mario closed his eyes, enjoying the moment. She wasn't yet ready to say the words he wanted to hear, but for once, she didn't push him away. And that was a start. Now there were no more bets, just them.